Hi, it's Lisa. I'm going to do a two-page layout today. I have several photos from a family wedding, and I have a couple of photos from the bridal shower, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and do them all on a two-page layout since I really needed a little bit more room here in order to have some space for journaling and stuff. So I thought I'd just put both events together. It was actually a wedding reception. The wedding was held on an island, and so they had the reception here and the bridal shower here. The wedding colors are not really represented. When I go to a wedding, I typically take photos of, I may take photos of the wedding party if I know people. In this case, I know the matron of honor, but I didn't get a good picture of her, so I didn't get her lovely dress in the appropriate color. But I got pictures of my parents, my aunt and uncle, and us, and we're all wearing these bright sort of tropical colors to go with the tropical theme of things. So those are the colors that I'm going to use, and that was also part of the bridal shower and the bridal shower invitation. The wedding invitation is a different color scheme. So my plan with this is to create a pocket over here out of vellum, since it will, you'll still be able to see some of the shower invitation, and then tuck the wedding invitation behind that, so I don't really have that color showing. So here's my sketch. So I've got my 6 photos. The paper, as soon as I really focused in on these photos, I knew exactly which paper to use. This is Sweet Sorbet from Stampin' Up. It's probably the prettiest paper I think they've ever made. And it was a celebration set from this past winter. And I think this is my last piece of the pretty floral. When you get Stampin' Up paper, you get 2 of each sheet, so which is unusual for me because most of the time with a 2-page layout I don't have 2 of each one, and I deal with that a lot in the 2-page Terrific class if you don't have 2 matching pages for the background. In this case, I have a full sheet of this coral color, and then I had part of a sheet. I had used either it or what's on the back for something else. So I'm going to have to add on some additional paper here, and what I decided to do was just go ahead and use some white cardstock. I'm going to be doing some stenciling, and there's a lot of white in the other papers with this collection. So we'll have our pocket here, a memorabilia, photos, and a place to put the title. Oh, there's more title. Didn't print there. Anyway, the stenciling is going to go over here. I cut my stencil on the silhouette. This is one I did myself, well, I used a silhouette design and repeated it and created a stencil. So we're doing some stenciling on some white cardstock. When you cut your own stencil, depending on the design, you may end up with both the positive and the negative image, which I did here. And so I'm going to use the regular stencil image, but I could also mist or something over this for another project, so it'd be really pretty. In the stencil class, I talk about the settings and things for the silhouette if you want to cut your own stencil, or for the Cricut if you want to cut your own stencil, and the kind of materials that I'm using. But if you can also, if you think it's a one-time deal, cut your design just outright with cardstock. It doesn't have to be any kind of special material, but I thought this fine kind of thing, I might use that again because I used to cut a design on the Cricut that I used more than once. So I went ahead and cut this out of some stencil material, and I'm going to put a flower here, and then kind of pull the rest of the page together. So I think it'll come together pretty quickly once the stenciling is done. So I'm just going to move everything out of the way, and we'll get ready to do to stencil these green leaves. I need to match the green here in this, and I think, what color is that? It's supposed to be pistachio pudding. Here's some more of the paper, and I pulled out a few of these that I liked. I may end up matting some photos or something in some of these papers, and this stripe, I've got some ideas for it too. So, but here's the green that I'm trying to match. So I need to get some modeling paste and figure out how to get that color of green. So I'm going to tape my stencil down. I moved it over to the right just a little bit so those leaves would be really hugging the far edge of the paper. I'm using light modeling paste, which I love, and some re-inkers. This is, I think I ended up using the Pear Pizzazz. I didn't have the same color ink in a re-inker as this paper, but the Pear Pizzazz, especially when you put it in modeling paste, it lightens it, and it comes out lighter. I did find that I needed maybe, or thought that I would need a little bit more of that modeling paste, so I'm adding a little bit more here to it so I'll have a good amount whenever I go over the stencil. Light modeling paste is like marshmallow fluff or like light frosting, and it just spreads and dries really beautifully. If you don't put any color in it, it's a little bit transparent. It's not completely opaque. So when you add color, it will look different depending on whether it's thick or thin. It'll look darker in the thick areas, just a little bit. Zooming in here, and I'm just carefully spreading this over the stencil, trying not to lift up the stencil. You will find here in a few minutes when I take it off I've got a little bit of a mistake, and we'll deal with that. Just making sure I don't really need the leftovers of this, so I'm putting enough of it on there not to be too thick, but not being too stingy with it either. Now in the stencil class I go over how to cut your own stencils, and we talk a lot more detail about different mediums and how to use them, and I go a lot slower. I don't speed through them quite so much as I do on these regular process videos. All right, pull that up and you see I do have a mistake there at the top where I let some of the modeling paste get underneath. I also have one leaf at the bottom where I didn't quite fill it out, so I can just sort of fix that by putting a little bit in there manually. The one up at the top I'm going to have to cover that, but we're starting to see sort of the lights and the darks. I do have a flower that I cut on the silhouette. This is a hibiscus, and I'd used the same flower on the bridal shower gift, so I got to use it again. It's always nice when you've bought something you want to use it a second time. I did feel like it needed some dressing up, so I'm adding a little bit of stamping. This is an old stamp set from Stamping Up that just adds little dots called itty bitty backgrounds, and just add some little dots of color, and then going around the edge in the Pool Party ink, which is the same color as the paper. And I'm going to put a brad in the middle of this. This was designed to be a 3D flower, but it doesn't have to be 3D. It can lay nice and flat. Now, I'm going to work on the pocket a little bit and also the spacing here. I thought that stripe would be pretty as a border. I also have another paper that would look good too, this paper with the black in it. And normally for a wedding I think that would look very good, but because this was a beach themed wedding, the groom didn't have on, you know, the traditional tux, and nobody did, and so I think the black is just a little too severe. So I'm just going to use that stripe and use a thin strip of that behind the coral paper. And then I've got to fit all this together so it's 12 inches of paper. So I'm using my grid mat. To me counting there. I am going to have to trim down my white piece a little bit on the right. I moved those leaves pretty far over to the right, but not quite enough. And also I'll be trimming down the vellum. I get my vellum at Hobby Lobby. It's the closest craft store to me. So it's the Paper Studio brand. And I love working with vellum. It's a little bit more aggravating in that you have to hide your adhesive, but I think it's so beautiful, especially for a wedding page. So I'm going to trim a little bit of the right side of that white paper off, and then I can glue everything together here and put my flower on. Now the vellum is going to need to be sewn on in this case, since I don't have anywhere to hide adhesive for that large an area. And I was looking at different ways of holding it down there in the middle of the page, and finally decided just to put washi tape around it. So I'm getting it placed where I want it to go, and then I'll use these little strips of washi to hold it in place while I'm starting the sewing. So I can start on the right side there and sew around it. Back from the sewing machine and adding a little bit of ink. I matted all the photos in cardstock because of Stamping Up paper. Of course, I knew exactly which cardstocks matched, but the cardstock just wasn't quite dark enough, defined enough, so I'm doing a little bit of ink direct to paper to give them a little bit more of a border. And that'll help all this stand. They stand out really well, I think the photos do, on that pretty floral paper, but I thought it needed just a little bit more. One of the designer papers, the Sahara Sand one, had kind of a scallop design, so I'm going to take a couple of small strips of that and put behind the floral, and I'm going to need to mat those shower photos as well. I was about to forget about those. The title part of it is cut on the silhouette using the Pacifico font, which I think I got from defont.com. And I used the Sahara Sand again for the shadow of it. Just cut the same size and offset it a little bit. And I'll have to glue all that down onto the vellum. I'm trying to decide where my journaling blocks are going to go. There's one that's sort of a general information about the wedding. I couldn't quite decide where to put it. It ends up over there on the page where it says wedding party for the title. I cut a second flower, and I just cut, using that same design from the silhouette, a green leaf to match the one that I did on the right side out of the stenciling. And a sticker is going to save me from my mistake and cover up that extra bit of material that I have, and I thought I'd put a second sticker with it and put the date on there. And I'm going to put this on with pop dots over top of the stenciled modeling paste. Okay, we've got our 2-page layout done here with 8 photos on it. I added an extra flower to balance over here on this side, and I had that on my sketch, but I just didn't think about it or whatever when I cut the first one out, but I just went ahead and added another one and tucked a little bit of journaling around. I decided that one piece looked really good there. I've got a pocket for the invitations for different events, covered up my mistake with a sticker, and I think that fixes up our page. And I used quite a bit of the paper out of my Stampin' Up collection, so I got some sheets of that used up. It's really beautiful paper, and I think it's really perfect for this wedding theme, especially this sort of tropical wedding theme. So check out my blog. You'll find the sketch for this. Also a link to the 2-page Terrific class if you're interested in that. And the stencil class will be coming up in September. Don't have an exact date, but I am working hard on getting that completed and available. It'll be a self-study class, so you can sign up whenever you'd like, and go through the lessons whenever you'd like for as long as you'd like. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I always appreciate your comments, and so many of you have left such sweet comments, and your questions. If I can answer them, I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much.